Every memory I'm looking in the back door. Every moment I was... Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Albums of the Month. Yeah! Every time I listen to an African artist, I think about the gigantic amount of music that we are missing from this long-forgotten country. Actually, continent. And if it wasn't for Mike the Snare, I would have completely missed this release. And thank God this encounter happened, because this is the album of the month. I do understand the comparisons people are making with Polygon Wonderland, but to be fair, this blows this album out of the water. And that's one of my favorite King Gizzard albums. The psychedelia here is much more captivating, and the production is also fantastic. I do think in the middle of the record we have some weaker moments, but that's totally fine. This is still one of the most interesting and exciting records I've heard all year, with the following positive highlights. Now the negatives. And for the score, I'll say 91%. There is a lot to be appreciated here. Some amazing hypnotic Afro-Jazz melodies, with the occasional chaotic moments that can be hit or miss to me, and some incredibly intense performances, especially when Joshua Ides shows up in the vocals. However, I do think at points the record failed to make the lasting impression with me. Negative highlights on screen? It's all very nice, but I think they could have made some more interesting arrangements. And more broad sound palettes as well. At least the positive highlights are fire. Hopefully this grows on me as time goes on. 72%. I have a really strange relationship with these British experimental rock / post-punk acts with gnarly lead vocals. I either love them, like Black Country New Road, or I hate them, like Black Midi.
I'm in danger!
To me, Squid is definitely the positive side of the spectrum, but it's not that high in there. There's a certain quirkiness in this record that I found really entertaining. We occasionally go across sound forms that are very intriguing. A great example of this is the outro of Boy Racers, and as I've mentioned, the vocals are strange, but in a very pleasing way. It sounds like the singer was actually enjoying making this. And at points he kinda sounds like Timmy from South Park. That's a compliment, by the way. We do have some moments that dragging for too long, performances that lack a certain push, and a climax that feel undeserved in the negative highlights. So to put it shortly, it has flaws, and I probably won't return to it very much in the future. But regardless, it's a very good release, and I understand why people love it so much. Oh hey look, it's the positive highlights passing on screen. Nice! Now to the score, 82%. Oh no. Oh no, look at the time. No! Please don't cancel me. Doesn't matter how many times I listen to this, in reverse, upside down, whatever, it still does not click. And while I did like this record way more than their debut, it's far from being one of my favorite records I've heard this year. We did have some notable improvements. The songs have much more interesting compositions. The jazz-influenced passages are quite great. And the vocals remind me a little of David Bowie in the Black Star era. And the positive highlights are songs that I honestly think are pretty nice. But as a counterpart, there's many moments here that are just tiring. Some songs feel like they're just lengthy for the sake of it. And the negative highlight is just as bad as pretty much the entirety of Schlagenheim. I just realized I never said the name of this album out loud, so I probably mispronounced it, so sorry for everybody that knows how to pronounce it, but that's not me. So to wrap it all up, yeah, I really hope someday Black Mudi's music will click with me, but it's still not happening. And it's definitely not because of lack of attempts, because I really tried getting into this. At least, I can recognize these guys have talent. 68% superb here. Knowing this was a covers album, I already went into this with low expectations. But my god, this thing is way worse than I thought it would be. This is possibly the most soulless album I've heard in a long time. All the songs are completely forgettable, and not only that, but they all sound the same. At one point I even went to check if everything was alright in Spotify, because I thought it was repeating the same song over and over, but no, it was running alright. Everything is that similar. Sure, in the beginning it sounds really cool and all, but after the third track, you realize it's completely stagnated. I think there's no other way to describe this album. This is easily one of the most insignificant albums I've heard in my life. And I do like Black Keys stuff, but this was just irredeemable. The positive highlight is literally just there, because it's the only song that I can recognize in the bunch, since it's louder, but that's it. I can't even name the negative highlights in here. Huge disappointment. 32%. This is possibly the most complicated review I've ever done. If it wasn't for DMX, I probably would have never gotten into hip-hop the way I do nowadays. So it's sad to see that his last statement into this planet is such a lukewarm disappointment. To me, this doesn't feel like a DMX album should feel. It doesn't have the same zany atmosphere that makes his album so great and unique. The producers I think tried to make this sound, but they ended up just littering the album with the barking noises. Then proceeded to make beats that are super mediocre and call it a day. Thankfully, it's not all loss. We do have some great tunes in here. The positive highlights are definitely worth checking out, especially the best track that is possibly his most emotional song ever. Sadly, beside the songs, the rest isn't very potent. It's sad to see him go in such a sour note, but at least we did have one final great DMX song. It hurts to say this, but this record is 59% superb. We do have some fantastic songs in here, but the main problem with this album is the fact that it doesn't have a specific shining characteristic. We do get the positive highlights that are quite good, and honestly, even the negative highlights have something to like. But despite me liking this album's experience this much, it's not really a hooking listen, because there isn't much here that's not already being made by other artists. Maybe the only thing that it truly has that it shines is Rag & Bone Man's vocals. Besides that, it's just a collection of songs that are nice enough to enjoy, but not great enough to truly remember. Therefore, 75% here. There isn't much to say here, it's a very by-the-numbers blues rock album, and of course this means this thing is completely forgettable. Due to its nature, this record gets very tiring, especially during the last tracks. But none of the songs are actually bad. In fact, there are no negative highlights in here, but it's not because all songs are good, and more like no song stands out in a negative manner enough to land there. The positive highlights are fine, 2 songs that I did liked, but I'm not head over heels for them, and yeah, basic review for basic album, 52%. And for the love of God, don't say goddamn I'm right at the end of an argument, even if you are really right, it just makes you sound like a douche. J. Cole, more like J. No, am I right, fellas? No, but for real, this thing is not bad. Initially, this album totally failed to grab me, because the first notes had a really strange mixing, but after that I got my interest again, but not much. It's more on the generic side of things. There isn't many memorable moments in here besides the lines where he references the real Slim Shady and Luigi, and we do have some really tiring songs, the negative highlights. Cole's flow isn't very consistent, it has peaks of greatness and also some serious state declines. And Lil Baby's feature is just lame. He sounds like he's running out of breath at the end of every bar he says. Still, I think this record is fine overall. We did have some really fine tracks in here, but nothing mind-blowing. I only wish it was more, you know? More than just 64% superb. It's not my favorite Griselda record, but it's certainly the most intriguing. The beats might not be too out there, but they have a really interesting style that frames perfectly inside the abstract hip-hop genre, and the first 3 tracks of the album for sure give the listener an accurate exhibit of how this album is going to evolve. Plus that, we have some really refined lyrics to make it even better. My main critiques here is that Mac's flow is kinda inconsistent here. It's not as bad as J. Cole's case, but at some tracks he's spitting fire, and in others he sounds a bit lost in his words, but thankfully it's rare. And the negative highlight is certainly a letdown, but at least the rest of the album is pretty potent, especially in the positive highlights. I just wish it wasn't that rough around the edges, but otherwise, really good record. 83% superb for this one. I don't know how I will be able to fit this into a very short review, but I will try my best. It's certainly impressive how Olivia is able to make such an evocative piece at such a young age, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a fantastic album. We do have some amazing songs here. Positive highlights, anyone? And we can clearly see that Olivia is a really talented singer and a songwriter with a very in-your-face attitude. But there's various moments in the record that feels really strange. Opener Brutal feels like a mess. And god, the lyrics of Happier make me want to drill my eardrums. Still, across various songs we have some really good lyrics, and some really bizarre ones that feel very awkward to listen. Sure, this album is not a fantastic work, but still has a pronounced personality. And considering this is her debut work and she's just 18, this is still a very impressive and daring record. With some very brutal lows if you know what I mean, but still a nice endeavor. And I'm mostly confident that her next release will blow this 63% superb album out of the water. It's time to spin the "Is this new Weezer album good or bad" wheel. And the result is... I'm disappointed but not surprised. Unless Weezer pull another trick from its sleeve, OK Human will be their best output of the 2020s. Because this album is just fine. The sound palettes used here remind me a bit of the sound of some songs in Hurley, in the sense that the production feels very dense and overcharged. Well, not as much as Hurley, but it's in that same lane. When an album has this style, most of the songs end up sounding like they're trying to gain your attention too hard, with very cheap tricks. Some of which repeat multiple times across the album, and it ends up with none of it afterwards. All the good ones is the peak of tryhardness here, since it has the exact same riff as Beverly Hills, the band's biggest hit. We do have some silver linings in here. The positive highlights are here to tell, but in an overall experience, this record is not that great. But considering the band's history, they could have done much worse. Also, why the hell it's called Van Weezer? It doesn't sound anything like Van Halen, or Van Morrison, or Van Dyke Parks. Is the title referencing an actual van? Regardless, stay away from this album. 56%. I have a problem with power metal, to be honest. I often find releases in this genre to be extremely saturated, but thankfully, this album manages to make it all sound balanced. This has mostly to do with the fact that the songs don't sound often like they're just showing off, like, look how fast I can play, bet you can do this, and this, and this, and it ends up forgetting to make music that won't tire your ears. We do have some moments like this in here, the negative highlights in case, but we also have some amazing ballads, songs that are able to show ability and quality at the same time, and those are the positive highlights. In vocal terms, Falaschi kills it. Just at some points, he kinda sounds more like he's crying than singing, but it's rare. And overall, I like this album way more than I thought I would, so surprisingly, it's an 84% superb release. My guy, I love this. The music is still just as great as the material of their previous albums, but here, I feel like they've done the best work to take their inspirations and actually transform it in something new. At the same time it has a really intense heavy psych / occult rock hybrid vibe going on, there's also some really mighty Dio-ish heavy metal cues. Altogether with Jess' phenomenal singing, and we have what is to me their best album. I am so excited to see what this band holds for us in the future. If it's more stuff like this, boy, I don't see reasons to not be wanting more. 88% superb for this thing. Yeah, this month wasn't the most positive out there, but at least we did get some pretty good albums in this month's collage. Every cloud has a silver lining, I guess.